programmed to bring you a special bulletin.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
5. Check for sound. 4.
It's showtime.
3.
Let's
2.
go.
1.
You're listening to the Pro Audio Suite, a program for audio and voiceover professionals. And welcome to another Pro Audio Suite. This week, the normal crew, plus we have a special guest coming in, the guy who uses Aurotones. He will explain himself. That's Simon Murphy from South Melbourne Recorders. But first, Robert, while we've got you fresh on that new microphone, you're using a new Lewitt.
Yeah, a Lewitt LCT 640, yep. I found it here in the studio. It was being used as drum overheads, and I thought, well, must be good enough for my voice.
Wow. Have you seen them, George?
I have. I've seen several of the Lewitt microphones. I've demoed one or two. They're pretty unusual, fascinating, cost-effective, and their big advertising buzz is their unbelievably low self-noise. I think if it's not the 640, it's one of those in that price range that claims a -2 self-noise or something crazy like that.
Yeah, they're very square. I'm just looking at them now.
They are very square, yep.
The LCT 840 is the one that is a tube microphone and a FET microphone in one. And you can mix between the two. Have you seen that one?
I haven't.
I've seen it. I've not tried it.
I know that the guy who does a lot of video podcasting, a guy called Warren Hewitt, and Warren is an audio engineer, songwriter, blah, 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 lives not that far from you, George, actually. And he does a lot of podcasting, and he uses Lewitts a lot.
Hewitt uses Lewitts.
Hewitt,
yeah, it's nice. It's got basically all your standard polar patterns. It's sort of like an enhanced version of a 414 in the way that it sits, although I can tell that the ground is center tapped in the diaphragm, not on the edge like the 414. But other than that, pretty much a very 414-esque mic in terms of its physical layout. And then on the front, it's got a -40, -150, or sorry, these are roll-offs, 40, 150, and I don't know why, a 300 hertz roll-off. And then,
That's very loud.
Yeah,
what are you recording? Jet engines up close or something?
Well, no, that's not the pad. I mean, the pads are 6. The pads are 6, 12, and 18, but the roll-offs are 40, 150, and 300. And then it's got all your standard polar patterns, but it's got a wide cardioid as well, basically. So it's got your omni, wide cardioid, hypercardioid, and then your figure 8.
Because the guy that owns Lewitt, from memory, used to be one of the designers or something at AKG.
Aha.
Hence the reason that it looks kind of like an AKG, I guess.
It's kind of inspired, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So there you go, the Lewitt, worth a try. In fact, I know the guy that distributes here. I must... We've been talking about Lewitt for a while.
It's got a really nice shock mount, too.
They made a really weird USB mic at one point that had its own box, imagine a USB mic with a proprietary box that's attached to the mic because they didn't want to put all the electronics inside the mic. It was a really strange mic. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but what Lewitt seems to do is they just like to take a mic that's, take conventional designs and just do something a little different. Like you said, like the 840 with the blend and the super low noise. They try to find little things to make them stand out. But it seems like their overall overreaching goal is to make a mic that's pretty uncolored. That's what I understand.
Yeah. It seems to be a more modern approach to a mic instead of like, we made this one, every component the same as a 67 from before you were born.
Yes, they're not trying to emulate anybody. They're just trying to be a modern, low noise, pretty flat condenser mic, from what I understand.
And do you like it, Robert?
I do. I've used it. I recorded my daughter's vocals on it the other day and it turned out very nice. And here I am on it, and it's an easy reach because you swing the boom over and lower it, and it goes from drum overhead function to podcast.
Anyone got anything this week?
Yeah, I got one. A couple of weeks ago on the last episode, we were talking about the 12 frames of silence in and out on Australian television standards and scratching our head, wondering why. I had a feeling that it had something to do with audio separation. We actually got an email from an old mate of ours, AP, a guy called Phil Lentz.
I know Phil very well, yes.
Now, Phil's a bit of an audio guru. He's been a radio jock in his time, does all sorts of bits and pieces, but he sent us a line and amongst other lovely things said, TV stations in the 1960s used to splice together the national ads using actual sticky tape, which were supplied on 16mm film to compile commercial breaks. On 16mm film, the studio track doesn't line up with the pictures. This is because the audio head can't physically be at the same spot as the film gate where the picture is projected. Therefore, if you spliced at the 30-second mark, you'd cut off the last bit of audio. It just seems to have continued on after video and now digital files came in. So there you go. There's your answer.
Wow, that's bizarre.
It's a physical thing.
Standardized process that just stuck.
That's just stuck.
And they're just still doing it because they're all used to that. And why change something that everybody's accustomed to?
That's right. Someone's decided that it's still a good idea.
It persists in Japan and I think England, and even here, not that it's a formal standard, but I know that even some of the editors that I've worked with, some of the ones that have been doing it since the 70s and 80s and whatnot, they were very religious about making sure that, everything was at least a few frames off of the beginning of the spot. And more now people just, boom, they just crash in right away and go right up to the end because it's all digitally, delivered and ins and outs are much more accurate. But it was never a thing in the U.S. by law. I know that. Or I believe it wasn't. Certainly not in my time as shipping spots and whatnot, but it still persists. Japan,
yeah,
England.
It's certainly a trap for young players here, as we discussed last time. If you try to send it in to get it on air and you haven't got that 12 frames top and tail, it comes back to you.
Mm-hmm. But I also used to like it when because I grew up in the UK, so I watched a lot of UK TV, of course, and commercial breaks were well isolated from content, which is something that seems to have gone by the wayside, but I kind of gather that the UK has stuck to it, where there is like an obvious break between a program and a commercial break.
Yeah, right.
And for some of those old systems, like the cassette decks that had the music search feature, you could do the commercial search feature in those countries.
Yeah, right.
On your VHS.
I need to order a pizza and find me a Pizza Hut ad quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Search for silence.
I remember doing the first television show I did. It used to take for I think we used to run the show. It used to go for about an hour, maybe an hour 20. We used to record on a Saturday afternoon, and it would take hours because every time I made a mistake, we'd go back to the beginning and start all over again. There was no editing. It was all live record. Wow. So rolling tapes in and out, and and live hosting.
Wow.
Wow.
Let's not do that. Yeah. Thank God for the digital age, can I just say. Imagine doing this podcast like that. Jesus, we'd never be finished. We'd still be going on episode 1.
We are.
Yeah. Tape casts.
Yeah. Now, George, you were talking about some new headphones that you've discovered.
Yeah, there's these, sometimes I don't like to talk about things I haven't tried yet, but, I do like to see, these things do come across my feed, thanks to like Facebook and Google knowing everything that I like. They send me ads for stuff on a regular basis for things that they think that I would like. And sure enough, sometimes they kind of nail it when they send something unusual or unique. And this one pair of headphones, which I'm kind of a headphone nut. I'm kind of a headphone addict. We'll do we should do a headphone episode sometime. But these are called Neura phones, which is N-U-R-A phones. And what makes these headphones really unique is a couple of things. One, they automatically, through their own internal onboard DSP, tune themselves to your hearing. So they will be dead on accurate. If you have a big dip at 4K, 12 dB or something, these headphones will compensate for you. And apparently it does it quite well. They will become extremely accurate. And these are consumer facing. They're really, I think, intentionally designed to be primarily a Bluetooth headphone. The good news is that the Bluetooth standard they use on these, which I really know and love, is APT, the aptX codec. Which, if you are going to buy USB headphones, make sure they have the aptX codec standard. I'm wearing a pair of Sennheiser 4.5 something or others that do have that codec standard. So when you listen to a source on Bluetooth, it's not using the standard Bluetooth encoding profile, which is pretty egregious to the sound quality, which is why people tend to, and anybody that loves audio tends to completely avoid Bluetooth. But if you use headphones with aptX and your source has aptX, your device, your cell phone, whatever, like my LG V20 has, the audio quality is remarkably good. It's really, really hard to distinguish between wired and Bluetooth. So it's primarily Bluetooth, but it also has corded options. It'll plug in via lightning cable, digital. It'll plug in via analog. It pretty much will handle just about any input. And the other thing that's unique about them is their actual design. They are in-ear and circumaural. So imagine a standard-looking pair of headphones with an ear cup that goes around your ear, and then from the center of the ear cup is this probe that sticks out that goes into the inner ear also, which is really odd-looking. But apparently once you get them fit right, they seal out the outside world extremely well. They're very well isolated and just dead-on accurate. So at $400 US, I'm hesitant to buy them, to play with them. But, I'd like to get one in to test out at some point. I use headphones extensively personally for my personal use and for my engineering use. So to say I have headphones that are tuned to my hearing would be pretty cool. That'd be a nice little thing for people to know that I'm hearing things that are accurate. But I guess at the end of the day, based on that Auratone thing, how important is accuracy when it comes to monitors?
It's what you know.
Indeed.
Yeah, true.
It's what you know. Yeah. I have some questions, though. How is the tuning done? I mean, I would imagine for it to really be accurate, it would have to do some sort of interactive process where it basically gives you a hearing exam in the process to create a graph of what your current, like hearing thresholds are.
Log onto a website and listen to these tones and tell us what you hear and how loud, and surely stuff like that.
Yeah, it does something like that.
There's another headphone someone told me about the other day that actually does work out the shape of your ear and then works out the sound based on that.
Really? Wow.
Who was telling? Someone told me about that a couple of days ago.
That's part of it.
Yeah. But surely that would change. I mean, I can imagine the shape of Brian Johnson's ear from AC/DC probably doesn't reflect his hearing range, considering the trouble he's had.
Right. It's you have to include the questionnaire where it says how many Who concerts did you go to?
Yeah, that's
and
right.
How old are you?
Yeah. How close did you stand to the speaker stack at your last Akadaka gig?
Right. How does the Bluetooth standard for APT work? Because do you have to have a transmitter and the headphones or the receiver? Or is this somehow baked into the Bluetooth standard to use the APT codec? Have they given away that codec on all the encoding sides?
They've baked it into the Bluetooth. So if you have Bluetooth, I think it is 4.0 standard support in your hardware. The APT codec is now baked into that.
That's so interesting.
So, so the sound quality is phenomenal.
We used to have APT in Source Connect, and we took it out.
Before we move on from the Neurosound, I found this section on their site which explains how it works. It's just a couple of short paragraphs. It's really pretty dang fascinating, if you would indulge me. The Neurophone plays a range of tones into the ear and then measures a very faint sound that your ear generates in response to these tones, called the autoacoustic emission, or OAE. This tiny signal, it says, originates in the cochlea and vibrates the eardrum, turning it into a speaker and playing sound back out of your ear. Yes, our ears make the sound. The sound is about 10,000 times smaller than the sound that went in. Encoded in the returning sound wave is information about how well you heard the sound that went in. The neurophone, I should say, uses an extremely sensitive microphone to detect this returning sound wave and a self-learning engine built into the neurophone to create your profile. No buttons or knobs. It all happens automatically in about 60 seconds.
Wow, isn't that
amazing or what?
fascinating?
That is amazing. So our hearing loss is imprinted into our acoustic emission, or what's it called?
The OAE, the auto acoustic emission. Auto, I should say, is spelled OTO, acoustic. Auto acoustic, not AUTO.
Acoustic. What is it? Transmission. I'm writing that down. That'll make me sound really smart at the next dinner party I'm at.
Yeah.
Yes. I believe this was a Kickstarter, and I thought it was vaporware for quite a while, as Kickstarter products tend to be. But this thing is now for real, and you can order it. So if anybody's looking for a present for this coming holiday season, let me know.
But so they act like a hearing aid, basically boosting the sound that you're
put a
losing in your
microphone out there.
hearing.
Yeah, put a microphone out there, and it's a hearing aid. At least the amplification type, not the cochlear implant.
No, these are stylish, beats-killing hearing aids.
You know what would be really interesting? If you could put the headphones on and do that and set them up and then print out the adjustments that it's made and actually see the deficits in your hearing, that would be pretty cool too, wouldn't it?
I don't want to know.
Yeah, probably frightening.
Yeah.
All the
Frightening indeed. I don't really want to know.
Yeah, true.
Now, talking of monitoring, we should get to our interview, which is the guy who uses the Aurotones. His name is Simon Murphy, and he owns a studio here in Melbourne called South Melbourne Recorders. How are you doing, Simon?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well indeed.
Simon's better known as King Auratone around here.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
that's right. The Aurotone. In fact, you've got probably one of the rarest pair of Aurotones because I've never seen any apart from yours.
I actually don't know where they've come from, and I've never seen them anywhere else either. So I don't quite know the history of them at all. It's the same size speaker as a normal Aurotone, but the box is probably twice as big lengthwise.
As in deep. Is that what you mean? Deeper.
No, is in height. So they're not square.
Oh, they're rectangular.
They're rectangular, but the speaker's the same size, and I've never been able to find anything on them at all. So it's got the Aurotone sticker on them, but I've always wondered whether someone's just knocked these things together.
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds like someone's rebuilt them.
Yeah, so they're in the booth and they're actually not used at all. They're just on the wall at the moment, but they were inherited.
Oh, so they were in the room when you bought the place?
I've been here for 20 years.
Yep.
SMR's been around since 76. I bought it with my partners from the older owner just over 10 years ago now, and they've just always been there.
We should put it on gear sluts. Take a photo and stick it on gear sluts and see what sort of response you
See whether
get.
anyone can track down what they are.
Take a photo and send it to us too, because we'll stick it up in the show notes for everyone to have a look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I will.
Because they are really quite... I'd never seen anything like it before. We've all seen Aurotones because they're just about everywhere in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They've still got that wonderful Aurotone laminate wood effect going on.
Yep.
That always used to start to peel.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Depends how many lines of cocaine you rack up on them, I suppose.
It definitely is the 80s then.
That was. Definitely.
Yes. Now, talking Aurotones, you do monitor through Aurotones when you're doing voiceovers. Do you use them for anything else?
Generally not. I use them for reference. I mean, when I started here, we had, it was before I had a say in what went in the booth, in the mixing studio, we had those and built into the walls again what I found out later were a pair of some tannoys, some horrible speakers. So that was the choice I had to mix on, really. And I just got used to mixing on them and then knowing what it sounded like on everything else. So I'm used to the sound of them. I mean, I've now got a pair of Event 2030s in the studio as well. I do use the Events a lot more now than the Aurotones.
It's funny with monitors. I always hear the discussion, especially with engineers who record music, with the classic NS10, thanks to Bob Clearmountain. The common thing I hear said is that if the guitar sound is just awful, you know it's actually right.
Yeah.
So what do you listen for with the Aurotones?
I kind of knew that when it was starting to sound a bit shit, when I had it sounding shit, what I needed it to sound like. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of, you got used to it and you knew what it had to sound like somewhere else, and you were just adjusting to go, all right, well, that sounds a bit ordinary, but I know that when I go and play it somewhere else, this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Weirdly, they do show out little, even though probably the frequency response to them isn't that great, it still does show out, little glitches and pops as things are going through as well from mouth noises and things. Not the super high end, but it does kind of emphasize those things a little bit as well.
I was actually going to ask you the question, with it not having such a low bass response, would you miss little pops and...
Oh, you do miss plosives well and truly.
Yeah.
They just disappear. And we had the other speakers here as well in the walls, but now the 2030s cover all that off well and truly. So I generally probably use those a lot more now and use the Aurotones as a bit of a reference as to if it's going to play on a shitty speaker somewhere, this is going to sound okay, which is probably what their original design was for.
Now, talking about plosives, here's a question for you. If, by chance, you end up getting a file of a voice and it's full of plosives, how do you fix it without rereading it?
RX is my saviour.
Yes, I was going to say, that's the reach, that's the go-to.
That is, RX will take that out enough to not have to worry about it at all.
I don't even know what RX is, but I'm...
Isotope plugin.
Yeah, Isotope RX is basically, it can take out your plosives, noise reduction. Basically, once it's recorded, if you need to fix it, if RX can't do it, you can't fix it.
Wow.
In the good old days before RX, but in digital days, you could, in Pro Tools I'm talking, highlight the section and basically just cut out a shitload of bottom end, would sometimes fix it. In worst case scenario, you would have to go and find that same syllable somewhere else, hopefully in the read that you hopefully had somewhere, or even in an outtake, and cut and replace was another one that I used to do occasionally. Which is a lot more time consuming. And when you've got a client sitting there paying $300 an hour to make his TV commercial, they don't get particularly happy about that. But you've got to fix it. You've got to fix it. So there's a couple of ways. But these days, Simon's exactly right. RX is the go-to.
Talking about your studio, Simon, I know it well.
Yep.
Without any names, what has been the worst experience you've had in a session?
Oh,
have you had a tantrum in there? Have you had
I haven't had a tantrum of talent. I've had tantrums of clients, but that's not not directed at me, but that's not outside of normal. I've had clients say things to talent, and one in particular that I was kind of like, and my direct client and I, as we heard him say it, sat back and went, this is going to not go well. When he said to the talent, you've definitely got a face for radio.
Oh.
As he walked out of the booth, thankfully after the recording. And to this person's credit, in the past, I think would have gone off his nut, just turned around and said, I'll take that in the jest that it was meant. But
nice. Wow.
I have heard previous examples of this person. That would not have been the response a long time ago.
Yeah, right.
I've got a funny feeling I know who this is.
Probably, you would know the person, yes. So I've had that. I haven't had anyone walk out, thankfully. Generally, it's all okay. I mean, a lot of my work's retail. We actually don't end up having a lot of different people through. It's the same people all the time because it's, we're churning out Coles commercials and things like that is just, right, we need to do that this week and get it out there.
Yeah. What's the most? This is because I know, being working on the other side of the glass, that sometimes there's a client in there, and their direction is basically all over the joint.
Yep.
And I often find then the onus falls onto the person like yourself, then to try and then sort of manage the situation to make sure the information
pull it back into line.
Yeah. How difficult do you find that?
Oh, it can be, depending on the person, the client. You just kind of try and sneak in some subtle suggestions here or there. Sometimes you've got clients that's what they want to do and they want to do it their way, and you can tell the session's just going south and you can't do anything about it because they want it a certain way and they're not getting what they want. Generally, I know with those ones, everyone leaves after the session and you re-recording it with someone else because they think they can't get what they want. But most people, you can just give subtle suggestions of, why don't we try this? And you can get it to work. But it's just trying to be subtle and offer another alternative.
It's all about being Switzerland, really, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the stuff we do now as well is we don't have a client in the room. We're doing it over the phone. They don't want to come to the studio. So it's great. Well, you record it. You think, all right, well, we think we've got what we want, but they don't want to stay on the phone either to listen to it as you're doing it. So you're then having to ring them, play it. Is this what you want? No, I like this. And it's great. It extends our sessions, but sometimes it's extremely frustrating.
Yeah. We tried to ring you for an hour and all we got was voicemail. I'm sorry. Fucking don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
well, I think
exactly.
I've sat with you, Simon, when we've actually done that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do you reckon that's the way it's going, Simon? We have that conversation a lot here in the studio, and I suppose considering that I've invested a large amount of money building a studio in my house because I saw that was the way that audio would probably go. Do you see that sort of starting to happen more and more now? Clients going, well, can't I just phone it in?
Yeah, like a lot of the stuff is definitely phoned in. There's the odd clients that still like to come down, and it tends to be, if someone wants to come down, it's because their client wants to come to the session.
Right.
So, then you end up with 20 people in the room and they all want to have a say, and that.
And they all want to have a conversation while you're trying to record voiceover and you can't hear a word the voiceover's saying. Yeah, been there, done that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a whole issue in itself. But a lot more is just done where we have talent in. I mean, a lot of it as well is sometimes just done, I get a file and away we go and chop it up. I've got one particular client that the agency doesn't even get involved in the voice recordings. We just get provided with the audio, and you have no control over quality, and it's not always great, but they are happy with it and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. So is that coming from an online voice agency, or is that a voiceover artist who's just plonked a microphone in the middle of their room, or what?
No, it's a voiceover artist, and then that just gets provided to the agency.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's good, sometimes it's just bad. There's just no quality control over what you're going to get or where they are when they do it.
Yeah.
Oh, so are they recording from their home, or are they recording from all over the place?
Different locations, yeah. They've got a home studio, or they record in their workplace and things like that. So it's, yeah.
Oh, God. Okay. So there's no consistency. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's every job. I mean, there's consistency on that one job, but across the whole lot, there's not. And you just got to do the best you can with what you get for that job.
So if it's truly terrible, can you say, look, we can't rescue this, or has it got that bad?
I have had some where I've kind of gone, I can't do much with this, and sometimes they've had it redone. Other times it's like, no, we're happy with that. Which I find more and more people are probably not as fussy about how things sound.
Yeah.
Sometimes it depends. It completely depends on the client, but some people just go, no, that sounds okay to me. That's fine.
You've opened a can of worms, and I probably wasn't going to go here in this interview, but you've opened a can of worms now, so let's start eating. We've had the discussion on the show plenty of times. I'd be interested in your input as to where you think the quality of audio is going inside agency and clients' heads in terms of, as long as the picture looks good, it doesn't really matter what it sounds like?
I think depends on the agency. I know there are quite a few around that are putting in their own booths. So depending on how they do that, how well that will sound, and then it depends on who runs it as to how that will sound. But I think still, because a lot of our work is with probably the major, the bigger agencies, they still have a care on how it sounds. But the smaller you get, sometimes it's like, well, that's what we've got, so that's what we're going to do.
Do you think that's a budgetary thing with the smaller agencies? Like so many times I've heard from people who I work with, look, we want to get some audio done, but we just don't have a budget. You know, what can you do? Or the good old, hey, look, we've got nothing this time, but next time around we'll sling you some extra.
There's never any extra.
There's never any extra, and that was going to be my next point. But do you think that maybe that's true? Do you think maybe it's a budgetary thing these days? It's sort of like, well, we'd rather spend more money on graphics and effects and video effects and all that sort of stuff than we would on getting a decent audio mix?
Sometimes, yeah, definitely. I mean, we're not at the high end of probably audio studios. We're in the middle, but you do get asked to quote on things and then you just never hear again. Yeah. It's like, well, what, was I too much? Were we not in the ballpark? And even when they say we've got no budget, it's like, well, even when you try and compete on no budget, sometimes you just go, we can't work for that.
That's right.
So at that level, it's sort of we bail out.
Yeah, where did it end up? Where did they take it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and what did it sound like?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. It's interesting, isn't it? I have the same conversations on a number of occasions. I have one producer that I work for that has his own clients, and there are times that he brings me jobs that actually pay quite nicely, and there are other times that he comes to me and he sort of goes, well, I don't know if you can do it for this, if you can't tell me, but this is what I've got to spend. And so we sort of have a conversation and we either go, well, yeah, I can do it for that rate, but we've got to cut corners here, here and here. Or you just go, well, I actually can't do it for that at all.
Yeah. I mean, we have had jobs where we've just said, no, we can't do it. This is what we can do it for. And they either then have to work out whether they can spend more or they've got to find somewhere else to do it.
Yeah.
You do end up with that line where you can't do it.
Yeah, it's just not worth your while. I've got a family to feed.
Yeah.
Is this a conversation you would have had 20 years ago?
Probably not as frequently. There's always probably been the odd one or two, but it's become more common. Definitely. Budgets just seem to shrink. And I think probably sound shrinks before video. I mean, we're in probably a little bit of a beneficial position. We've got video studios and audio studios within the business. So probably the video's always, to a degree, helped prop up the video side, the audio side a little bit because the work feeds between the two. Yeah. As sad as it is, there's a lot more money in video than there is in audio, I think. So it props it up a little bit.
So as a business owner, having both video and providing both video and audio studios, if someone comes to me with a job where they're doing both, where they're cutting vision with you and also doing audio, does that give you a little room to wiggle on your audio? It must do, surely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you can provide a combined quote. And this is what the job is, so we can then do that. And it's very easy to chop and change something quickly as well. So, if one of the editors changes an edit, moves a word, you just get buzzed on the phone and it's like, just shunt this 2 frames and then you can hit export again. So all those little things get faster.
What do you reckon, if in an ideal world, how would you like to see the business working for you?
The way we're structured now works very well. I mean, ideally, I'd love someone directing most sessions rather than be left to, here's what you need to do, sometimes not much of a brief, guessing, and then being told after you've spent, 20 minutes getting in a ballpark, no, that's not what we want. We want this. So, it's probably going a little bit back to the old days of you've got someone there to tell you that has written or whatever knows the ad to direct what they want.
Yeah.
We've become engineers /directors/producers sometimes.
For half the hourly rate that we used to get paid.
Well, our hourly rate has not changed in the 20 years that I have been here.
Yeah.
So, that's what it is. I mean, we're still here and we're still making money, but that's that kind of thing of, it's not gone up. No. Thankfully, it's not gone down.
It's funny you should say that in that sort of awkward in-between time of leaving a full-time job and sort of opening my own project studio, let's call it, 13 years ago, or however long ago that was, I did 3 or 4 years of freelance work. And the going rate back then was $50 an hour. And I bumped into a guy who I'd worked with a long time ago who's actually still out there freelancing, and sort of said, "Look, just out of interest, what's the sort of going freelance rate?" And he goes, about $50. $50 an hour. I was like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't change. It's just rock solid.
No.
Now, this is a question that's laced with probably poison. But what's your feeling about people like myself who are set up at home? Does that annoy you?
No, I don't have an issue with that. Generally, it hasn't really affected the work that we get. And for our work, yes, we might miss out on the recording side of it potentially, but usually you still get some of the work from it. You've still got to mix it. We haven't had anywhere it's been done remotely and then it all just disappears and you don't see it. You still end up getting a file to edit and mix and work with. And, there's people that we do use remotely and say, all right, can we have this? And you just get it and it's done quickly. The issue sometimes is you're not quite sure what you're going to get, particularly if you haven't worked with someone remotely before. There's a lot of variation in how people have set themselves up.
Yeah, there has to be some, to me, there should be some kind of I don't know how you would do it, but some kind of a standard that everyone works to. I mean, I talked to George, who's part of this show, and we talked about him actually certifying, having a George Whittam, George the Tech certification.
Yeah. I mean, I will, if someone says, if we're told we want to record this remotely, I always want to hear what I'm going to get first, just to get a little bit of a guarantee that it's going to be workable enough.
How low do you go when it comes to accepting audio?
Oh, it depends on the job. I've had some stuff where you have to accept it because you've got to make it work. I've had stuff where people have recorded overseas on portable gear in rooms that are fully tiled, and it's like, right, shove yourself in the wardrobe. Put all the pillows and blankets in the wardrobe, throw a blanket over the back of your head, and you just do the best you can with what they can do. And it's hard because a lot of voice talent have to then learn to get technical about stuff that they don't know. I know I've spent a bit of time with a few people just trying to get them up to speed to just do enough to get me something. Even before they've gone away, if they just, I've gone and bought this, it's like, okay, that's what we've got to work with. This is how we're going to get the best we can out of it.
That's a good idea. I mean, having someone like you, if I'm working with you and I'm going to be going away in a hotel for a month, what do I need? What do I need to do to take with me?
Well, I mean, sometimes it hasn't been what do I need? It's been, this is what I've got.
Oh, okay.
And it's then been, all right, well, this is what we can do with what you've got to get the best we can. And we've always got it and pulled it off, and it's been okay. But, I can then sit there and hear it and go, oh, it's just not quite as good as we would normally like to put out.
Yeah, it's tricky. I must admit, it is very difficult when you're on the road trying to record. The last time I was away, there was a fridge that was the size of a truck in the apartment I was renting, and so I had to whack because I couldn't get to the plug. It was behind the fridge, and the fridge weighed, a couple of ton probably. So you try and record in the room, but you had to wait for the fridge condenser to stop and then just go for it before it kicked in again.
Yeah. I mean, I had one recently actually where we needed to change a price on something. There was no way we were going to get the talent back here or get them to where they could do anything. So I had them record it into their iPhone and send me the file, and I used as little of it as possible, and it was masked by the music and was okay enough because because it just had to go.
But the ear misses it too sometimes if like you say, the smaller, you need to take the smallest shaving you possibly can. But I've also heard it work on a cold voice spot too because it's so small that the ear just misses it.
We've replaced half words with people from here because we can't get the person and just matched in as close as we can. And it's the same. It is once you get a tiny piece in there, you'll always hear it, but you play it to someone else cold and they go, what was wrong with that?
That's right. Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to do what you can do to get the job done because it's got to go. Particularly with a lot of our retail work is you might get a brief in the morning and the ad's got to go to TV by the afternoon. We just don't have the long lead times with retail that we'd like to have.
I was going to say, it sounds like retail's a lot like radio.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. We've got an ad on air this afternoon, but can you edit the ad, do the audio and get it to stations within the day? And it's like, yes, you need to get all your stuff together now because we've got to start now.
That's right. Otherwise it won't happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
The miracle workers, that's what we are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So looking down the track, you've been there 10 years. Well, you've owned the studio for 10 years. Look ahead another 10 years and tell us what your business looks like now.
I don't know. It's kind of, I hope we're still doing the work that we're doing, but have evolved a little bit into the newer markets of, online and all that kind of stuff where, again, that's another place where budgets get smaller. We get asked to do, we need to do a YouTube pre-roll. Great. Well, here's the quote. But it's only for online. It still costs the same amount to edit and produce. But that's the tricky part of all this stuff that online is that it doesn't cost someone as much to put it out there, so they don't think it should cost as much to produce. But potentially, someone's still got to shoot it. Someone's still got to pay the talent. We've still got to edit it and pay the engineer. I've still got to record or mix whatever comes through, and it still costs the money that people don't seem to want to pay for online material. To me, that's a point where studios of our size tend to start to lose out to sometimes a video editor that might sit in a room by themselves and then mix it themselves, and you don't always have the control over that and how it's going to sound. But sometimes the clients go, well, that's okay because it cost me half as much.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I see that a lot. I'm starting, I shouldn't say that I see it a lot. I see it more and more that video editors are actually becoming /audio engineer. And, you've only got to look on LinkedIn and you sort of start to see that happening. But it interesting. So go on.
Sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was going to say, I had it this morning. I had a job that we didn't edit. We were provided an OMF file and the pictures, and it had to go out today. And can you madly mix this? We need to make it compliant. And I loaded the file in, and the first thing I saw was audio within the first 12 frames. And I rang them up and said, well, you can't do this. Australian rules are 12 frames of silence, top and tail. Oh, okay. Can you fix it? Yes.
Yeah.
And again, you fudge it because they've got to get it out, and you do the best you can with it, and they're happy and away they go. But I bet the next time it comes back in, it'll still have sound in the first 12 frames of silence.
We were only talking about this in the last episode. I had talking to a guy who had 6 episodes of a little TV thing, 47-minute episodes that he wanted mixed. And we were talking about it, and a bit like you, did the quote, and we had a couple of chats afterwards, and, can you do any better? And I sort of went in and I did the best I could, sort of took out most of the margin and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, long story short, job never sort of landed on my desk until I got this on a Tuesday afternoon. I'll never forget. I get this manic phone call from this guy. Mate, that job we were talking about, I had it mixed by a guy in New Zealand who edited it as well, and he sent me it all over, and I've just uploaded it all, and it's all been rejected because video reasons and audio reasons and blah, blah, blah. Can you help me out? So long story short, I ended up spending from that Wednesday through till the following Sunday night, madly remixing these 6 episodes. And
costs them more in the end.
That's right.
But they don't think about that.
No. Well, this has been a worthwhile chat.
It has indeed.
I felt like I've whinged a bit about the cost of the costs reducing and work reducing, but
Well, look, I don't think you're alone there. I've got a mate of mine who I was only speaking to a couple of weeks ago, who, when I first left radio and went into agency land, was my boss at George Pat's, and he's sort of since then moved on and sort of, built a couple of studios for other people and done a lot of work, and now about 3 years ago built his own place in North Sydney. But he's got contacts coming out his wazoo. But, there are even big shot clients, are sort of starting to say, look, we just haven't got the budgets that we used to have. So, I think it's the top down. I don't think it's just the middle, being you and sort of me, probably even lower down the pecking order, having a home studio. I think it's across the board, mate. I don't think it's just us.
yeah.
So, I think the days of, the long lunch and $350 an hour in the recording studio to do the soundtrack for our next Nike commercial, I'm sure they'll always be there, but I think
It's fewer and fewer.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to the amount of times that happens is going to get less and less. I remember when I was at George Pat's, one of the other clients we had was a new magazine that was coming out called Take 5 magazine. They had to record, or they had to make the TV commercial, which had all been shot on location. But the voiceover tag had to say, Take 5 magazine, out now. But I got a phone call from this external recording studio after these creatives had left, saying, just so you know, we spent 3 hours with ex-voiceover talent in the voice booth recording the voiceover tag. And finally, his parting words were, I think you've got enough now, I'm leaving. So if you want to talk about the days of excess, 3.5 hours to record a 5-word voiceover tag, that's pretty excessive. I don't know about you, Simon, but I normally find most of the time when you sit, I've never sat through a 3.5 hour session like that, to be fair, but most of the time when you have one of those nightmare sessions, it's usually in the first 15 takes that you end up going back to anyway.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. It's like, if it's going to be right with that person, you'll get it right reasonably quickly. And then it's usually down to the person directing not knowing what they want.
Yes. Or yeah, that's right. Let's try this. Yeah.
And or knowing how to direct what they want.
That's interesting, isn't it? Directing is really a skill that is not easily learned.
No, and I think it's probably being lost a little bit too, because
Agreed.
People don't come to sessions anymore. Mm-hmm. And it used to probably be that the creatives came to sessions and the junior creatives probably came along with them. So therefore they learnt from watching other people work and direct, whereas it doesn't happen anymore. So if they ever get a chance to come to a session, they actually don't know how to direct what they want.
We were going to let you go, and I'm respectful of your time, but just one more quick question since you've sort of headed down that off-ramp. In terms of casting, staying in that vein of what we're talking about, I've always found too that, and especially these days where the American model of auditioning a job is becoming more and more common, especially with these online voiceover agencies. Do you think that that's another skill that's sort of being lost, is that ability to listen to someone's demo, but then read the script and in your head hear that voice?
Probably not so much asking to demo for jobs, but definitely not being able to hear past what they hear on the demo of what will be their ad. And probably just rejecting someone because it's like, oh, well, no, he doesn't sound like what I want, or she's not the person I want. It's like, well, hang on, they can do more than the demo. A demo is only a demo.
Yeah, if he dropped his projection and sort of, had a bit more empathy in the read, then all of a sudden it could go from, this retail spot could sound like just the voice that, I need for my, community service announcement about dead puppies or whatever.
Yeah.
Nice choice.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to go here. I think mine's dead.
I was trying to go.
But can you talk about? Well, the biggest thing from that would be, but can you talk about dead puppies conversationally?
True. There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Everything
AP just did.
is conversational. Can we have a retail ad but make it conversational?
Yeah. Can you be the voice of God but sound like the guy next door?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the old classic? A little more purple. A little more pink than purple would be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brown. Yeah, that was brown.
Well, mate, thanks very much for your time. I hope that in 10 years' time we can jump online and have the same conversation and hear about where your business is then. See if it's kept up with your expectations.
Well, hopefully it's... Well, for starters, hopefully we're still here. That things are still moving along nicely.
I'm sure they will be. I mean, at the end of the day, content is always going to be... Well, content's only becoming more and more demanded, I guess. We've got to find a way to make ourselves sort of fit in with that model, I guess, without dropping our pants and doing it for nothing.
Yeah, but quality is always going to be quality, and I think it will come back around. I've got a feeling that we're getting close to hitting rock bottom. Surely, I think we hit it.
Yeah.
With the iPod and buds, we hit the rock bottom, and it's really funny now because people are buying hi-fis again, and they're buying records again, and listening to music again. So,
well, I read the other day that cassettes are making a comeback.
All right, so we hadn't hit rock bottom yet. Then.
It was something. There's some, I can't remember now the full story, but there's some factory in Germany that basically was one of the last to be making cassettes, and all of a sudden production's gone back through the roof again.
Yes, I do.
As long as I don't have to go back to the day of couriering cassette tapes around town for people to listen to.
Yeah, remember that? Wasn't that fun?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that was good, mate. Thank you.
And also
No worries,
patio doors. Patio doors.
Patio doors.
Well, the patio doors, the first patio doors I saw in a studio was at SMR.
The pair in front of me.
Yep. And they work a treat.
Yeah.
They're good.
I've often contemplated if we ever had to reconstruct the studio, I know how I'd do it, and it's like it is here.
I still go to Clemenger occasionally on a freelance basis, and they've got double sliding doors. Works the charm.
Yeah, beautiful. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to open mine and go and have a cup of tea.
And get some fresh air in the booth by the sounds of it.
Well,
you haven't got the dog in there, have you?
No, he's not in the booth. I'm dreading opening the door. I can tell you now. It's going to be like the Somme out there. In fact.
Give me it now. There it goes.
There's a green haze.
Light a match. It's winter. It'll keep you warm.
I dare not light a match. You hear the explosion from there. So there we go. That's Simon Murphy, the man with the unusual Aurotones. But after that interview, we did a bit of research, and Robert.
Private Detective Robert.
Detective Robert. Got the magnifying glass out and the deer stalker and found them.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah, they're a increased bass version of the standard Auratone.
The 5S.
The 5S, right?
5S. They can't be too much increased bass. I mean, I'm sure they would be considering the bigger size, but...
Bigger box. It's not ported. It didn't look like there's any porting, so it's just a little... I mean, it'd be interesting to know how much more, but certainly in theory, the bigger box does give you more bass resonance. And
Well, the box is twice the size of a standard Auratone.
Right.
Twice the bass.
Yes, addicted to bass.
From none to none.
Twice the bass times zero.
From fuck all to piss all.
Yeah, that's right. But they are quite unique. Because the first time I saw them, it's like, what the hell are they? And Simon had no idea either. But they'd been there from when the studio was pretty new. They probably went in very early 80s because that studio, as he said, was built back in the 70s. And he's been there 20 years, and they were certainly well and truly nailed to the wall then. And based on how old Aurotones are, and they were so big in the 80s that we're kind of thinking they would be very early 80s.
I think the good takeout from that interview, though, is, and especially talking about him having to mix to those Aurotones, is, that if you don't have the money to afford the perfect set of speakers, as long as you understand what you're hearing, you can mix to anything, right?
As long as it's there. Right. Like I would counter that with only that. The one thing about the Aurotones are that you are truly not hearing a lot of the very top end and the very, very low end. But as long as you have a system that's giving you most of what at least you're able to hear, then you've got the information, and then it's up to you to sort of internalize it and remember what things are supposed to sound like. I know that, for me going into a studio, I often use Ziggy Stardust as an album if I'm not familiar with a room and a pair of speakers, and I'll just listen to that because I've listened to that album so much. I have a good feeling for what it should sound like using that. But another pair of speakers actually that is kind of popular, at least here in the States. George, you might know about these. Do you remember the Minima 7s or the Minima 5s, I think, too?
Oh, well, Minimus was like a Radio Shack house brand.
Yeah. So they were basically a rip on the Boston acoustic speaker. So they're a little 4-inch driver about the size of a Auratone, and then a tweeter. There's the tweeter. And they were ported. At least later models were ported. And, man, I got a pair of those when I was in high school for $50, and that was like my first pair of speakers that gave me enough info that I could actually really mix off of. Before then, I only had like the speakers in my boombox. So,
oh boy,
yeah.
I often think of, when I think Auratone, I also think of Bose 801s. Do you remember the Bose 801 speakers, or the 901s, maybe actually?
And the 401s. Well, the 801s and the 401s and the 801s, and they had that processor that would make them sound somewhat decent because they were just a whole array of basically speakers about the size of the Auratone driver.
Yes, they're a bunch of 4-inch drivers. And the 901s actually were for home listening, where 8 drivers faced backwards, 1 driver faced forwards.
Batman.
Start over with 8 drivers. With 8 drivers.
Yeah. Yes, the consumer version, 8 drivers were rear firing, 1 was front firing. So the majority of the sound you're hearing was reflective sound. But they were all 4-inch drivers. But the speakers sounded lousy unless you plugged in their own EQ box, which was basically dialing in a nice disco smile.
Exactly.
EQ
yep.
on the speakers to make up for the deficiencies in the response. So if you did a similar thing with an Auratone, they might actually sound not too different.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they were ported speakers as well for those Bose. They were. The really good thing about the Bose, I mean, Bose got much more into consumer stuff, but the 801s and the 401s, the big deal about that was you could basically bring those with a subwoofer and have a really loud, good-sounding PA with like half the weight.
Yeah. The 801 was the pro speaker, and the 901 was the consumer one. And I don't know which came first, but what was funny was the pro was just a reverse of the consumer. The 901, the speakers mostly faced the rear. The pro version, they flipped it around, and they made them all mostly forward-facing. So it's really clever, those Bose guys. The other thing they made years ago that I always found extremely fascinating was their bass cannon, which was just a humongous tube with a subwoofer placed at the exact right place in the center of the tube, not right down the middle of the tube, but in the exact spots so that the two signals would be phase coherent when it came out of the tube. And these things were like 12 feet long.
It's the waveguide that they advertise now with their whatever radio. Bose has always based itself off of big sound in small packages, whereas Auratone is small sound in small package.
Right.
No, bad sound in small package.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, as long as you know what they should sound like and they translate, it's all about that, as they call translating. As long as that what you hear translates to the real world, that's the by far the most crucial thing. And people also mixed on NS10s from Yamaha, which I never liked the way they sounded, but that wasn't really the point.
I got a pair of them over here, and I have a pair of NS20s.
Oh, NS20s. Okay. Is that a larger driver?
As a larger driver, more of a consumer version of them. Really funny. I do like NS10s a lot, and they are not pleasant to listen on, but I have to say that especially more for mixing music, they are sort of completely the opposite of a pair of Genelecs. And so NS10s have this big 4K rise, and they will fatigue you after a while. But when you're mixing music, and it seems to be a lot of the times the style with the music is that you want the vocal to more sit into the mix. It's not like a commercial where you need to hear every word and every, tick and like you have to declick it even. So the NS10 would put so much vocal out there that you would put it where you think it needs to go, and then naturally it would sit back. And there is something about mixing on NS10s, especially music, where it just translates across to again, for the 80s, those boom boxes and those other sort of more consumery systems. And now what music guys are doing is they're still mixing on NS10s. They've just begun to add subwoofers to the setup, just to kind of fill that in. Now, the funny thing is the Genelecs are so much darker, especially in that mid-range. They kind of, like, Genelecs definitely have, like, somewhat of a smiley face thing. They got a spitty top end and that, that bass that they have, but they, when you're mixing a commercial and you get that vocal to pop out of a Genelec, then when you play it on a small speaker, the vocal just absolutely flies out of the thing because the Genelec was already kind of suppressing it a little bit in that vocal range. And so I do tend to do a lot of my post mixing on Genelecs and my music mixing on NS10s. And I would actually argue that possibly, because the other pair of speakers I have, if anyone knows about these, have you ever heard of Dunleavys?
I have.
They are 6 feet tall. The ones that I have a 10-inch, a 4-inch, and a 2-inch. So they're these. Actually, Duntech, I believe, the original company that kind of started this style of speaker, I believe was an Australian company. But Dunleavys were out of Colorado, and they are just sweet mastering speakers. Bob Ludwig kind of made them popular with the even bigger version of these types of speakers. And I gotta say, you pair the NS10s up with a subwoofer, and then you compare the NS10s to the Dunleavys, and you compare the Genelecs to the Dunleavys, and the NS10s are much closer. And the Dunleavys are used. They're a $6,000 pair of speakers.
Wow. And passive, right? They need to be amped.
Yeah, they're bi-amped. I got a Mark Levinson amp for them, but yeah, they're really cool.
Have you ever tried the Yamaha MSP10 Studio?
Are those the new powered ones?
Well, they're pretty old now, but I'm guessing they'd be 15 years old.
Yeah, they still have the white woofers, but they're sort of like Yamaha's response to it. Oh.
No, they look more like a Genelec. They're piano black, or they came in timber. They're big speakers, the MSP10 Studio.
I haven't. Like the only speakers from Yamaha I'm really, truly familiar with are basically the NS10s and the NS20s, which are basically a slightly more bass version of the NS10. Because I think Yamaha also has like the newer HSM or HMS, which are, and I have not listened to any of those, to be honest.
What monitors are you using?
I've got 2 sets. I've got some Dynaudio acoustics, some passive ones that just run off an amp, and then I've just got some active little Fostex ones as my B speakers.
Oh, cool! Are they the little 4-inch ones?
Are the Fostex ones?
Yeah, they've got a tweeter and a tweeter, just the little small and two bass ports. I can't remember the model number. I'm hopeless with that stuff.
4.2 or something like that.
Something
42s.
like that. Yeah, they're little small ones. But a tweeter and a sub. I sort of swap between the two. Pretty much.
Have you guys ever heard of ProAX or Pro AC speakers or ProAC? Have you ever heard of those?
Nope.
No.
They are very popular in music circles. They're passive. Little, I don't know what it is, a 6-inch driver with a tweeter. You'd think like, gosh, these things can only be worth a couple $100, and they go for several thousand. They sound fabulous, and they have an amazing amount of bass for again, like something about the size a little bit bigger maybe than an S10. It is ported, but those are pretty awesome speakers for like big punch for the size of the package.
Nice. So you're saying they cost several thousand, or they sound like they cost several thousand?
They do cost several thousand, and they're passive. Right. There's no amp.
Well, my ones, according to one of the Gear Sluts reviews on the MSP10s, the studios, you can actually dry your hair to them. So, and you can.
Right.
You can actually blow your hair off.
You're talking about the air coming out of the port?
It's got 2 ports, and you get a lot of air coming out of there, a lot of movement.
That reminds me of the JBL Century 100s, which I think that was the consumer version, and the 4312s. These were speakers very popular in the late 70s and early 80s, kind of like around the same time that the Aurotones ruled, and they were these big 12-inch, actually another white cone. They were kind of famous for their white cone, but they're 12-inch driver JBL speakers, and they have a port. And the same thing, man, those things put out a lot of bass, and you put your hand over the port, and it just move your hand,
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like a sail.
Well, I think we've pretty well covered off monitoring this week. On the next episode, we'll be talking with the guy we mentioned earlier, a guy called Phil Lentz, who's a bit of a tech head, now based in Perth, working in television, but has a huge background in radio and TV. So that'll be next week.
Looking forward to that one. Phil actually gave me my first gig in radio.
Oh, well, let's cancel that one then. He has a lot to answer for.
Well, we'll hear from him then. See if he remembers.
All right. I'm sure he will. It's just us that doesn't. Yeah.
Who are you?
I've got a funny story about our first meeting, but we'll do it next week. I'll tell you then.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Ooh, a teaser.
Oh, yeah, we love a teaser.
Out.
Goodbye, goodbye. Wipe the tear, baby dear, from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh. There's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, old thing, cheerio, chin chin, na poo toodaloo, goodbye.